No, but what did he put out there in terms of a sign? I'll never be able to answer that question. The sign was never going to be that when the ammo comes on this day, that I'm going to launch this attack. And more so, there was never going to be a sign because we learned 2 years later in the trial that these are things that he had in his diary. 1993, he wrote, now remember the attack happened March 23rd, 2003. 1993, he writes in his diary, I do not like the military. They have too much control over people's lives. I suppose I'm just anti-government. 1996, anyone who stands in front of me shall be considered the enemy and dealt with accordingly. 1996, destroying America was my plan as a child and as a juvenile and in college. My life will not be complete unless America is destroyed. Destroying America is my greatest goal. 1998, he joins the Army.
Huh.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Life in Bomb City podcast. I'm Aaron Favor.
And I'm Dr. Beth Rodriguez.
And we are coming to you live from Amarillo, Texas, right from the Social Sciences Department here at Amarillo College. This morning we have a special guest with us. Mr. Bart Womack is here, author and veteran. A command sergeant major, retired. Mr. Womack served the United States Army with distinction for over 29 years as a professional soldier. Providing focus, leadership, and mentorship to all officers and enlisted soldiers. He's born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, holding a Bachelor of Science in Business Management from Parks University, a Master of Business Administration from Waynesburg University. Some highlights of his career are he was the distinguished military career, we should say, include being a drill sergeant, a Ranger instructor, and sergeant of the guard at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. He culminated his career in dual roles as Commandant of Non-Commissioned Officers Academy and the 101st Airborne Division Command Sergeant Major. He is a combat veteran. He's received 2 Bronze Stars, one for Valor, the Legion of Merit, and the Combat Infantryman Badge with a Star, the Tomb Guard Identification Badge, the Army Ranger Tab, to name a few. He's also a distinguished member of the regiment of the 327th Infantry Regiment and the 3rd Infantry Regiment, respectively. Mr. Womack is the author of the book Embedded Enemy, and we're pleased to have you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I feel like pretty awestruck at all the stuff that you've done, and I think it's really amazing. And before we even start anything, I want to say thank you for everything that you have done, because a lot of times people don't get that chance to thank people at this perspective, and I'm actually getting to look you in the face and say thank you.
Well, I truly appreciate that.
Yeah, what an honor. Can you tell us a little bit about? We've just heard a little bit about your bio. How did we get to have you here today, talking about what we're going to be talking about?
Yeah, it's all predicated on the embedded enemy story of that attack that happened March 23rd, 2003, where 2 were killed and 13 more were wounded. From an insider threat attack by a fellow American soldier. It was that experience that my takeaway from that was to help others understand that an insider threat exists, first and foremost, and that it's closer than you think. In fact, I even created a quote that says, no profession, level of education, ideology, or religion is above reproach. There is no profile. The insider threat is closer than you think. I served in an organization where we all took an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And then we had someone who took that same oath, literally shoot one of our guys in the back. And then, as I mentioned, killed another and wounded 13 others. So after that, you can only deduce that, like, who do you trust?
Yeah.
More importantly, Bart Womack didn't trust anybody. I allow people to form theirs, but that's mine. I mean, it can't get worse than that, to where it's one thing that you know him and you think you know him, but we've all took the same oath and put on this uniform for this thing that we thought we were doing for the same reasons, and not the case. So if that can't be trusted, there are very few things that can, in Bart Womack's life, especially.
Absolutely. I could see that for sure, especially all the things that you guys went through together to even get to that point. And then to have that happen, I can't imagine how that is going to affect everything that you're thinking. And it actually probably sets you up so that you could help other people understand that there are those threats out there that maybe we're not aware of. So the sad thing is bad things happen, but the good thing is people like you find something good from it and try to educate other people. And I think that's huge.
Yeah, I got goosebumps when you said find something good, because that's exactly what this always was, is that after lives lost and bodies mangled, what's the takeaway? I always felt that there was some sign that we missed something somewhere in this happening, that my leadership level was way up here, but at his level, what was missed? What did he put out there that someone just did not pick up on? That's the thing that troubled me, and that's what caused me not just to tell the story, but to put these proactive situational strategies in the story. So you don't get a synopsis of the story at the end. You get some tools to mitigate this from happening in your life. That was the takeaway, that let me help people so they don't become a victim like we did of something, so close to you. We all get kind of fooled by this proximity illusion. The closer it is to you, the less you expect something to happen. But let me tell you, it doesn't work that way. And I'm surviving proof, of that. um, no, but what did he put out there in terms of a sign? I'll never be able to answer that question. The sign was never going to be that when the ammo comes on this day, that I'm going to launch this attack. And more so, there was never going to be a sign, because we learned 2 years later in the trial that these are things that he had in his diary. 1993, he wrote, now remember the attack happened March 23rd, 2003. 1993, he writes in his diary, I do not like the military. They have too much control over people's lives. I suppose I'm just anti-government. 1996, anyone who stands in front of me shall be considered the enemy and dealt with accordingly. 1996, destroying America was my plan as a child and as a juvenile and in college. My life will not be complete unless America is destroyed. Destroying America is my greatest goal. 1998, he joins the Army. Planned long ago.
Yeah.
He started writing those things 10 years before this attack. Joins the Army in 1998. In February 2003, remember this happens in March 2003. February 2003, he writes, I'm not going to do anything as long as I stay here at Fort Campbell. As soon as I am in Iraq, I'm going to try to kill as many of them as possible. Jeez. So as much inside me that feels that there was some type of a sign, the sign was never put out there, what I just read you, that he had put it in the diary. So it's just a matter of getting in the close proximity of Iraq, as he says. Our ammo had just come that day. It came so late in the day, they began to get dark. Commanders were instructed to they could issue the ammo whenever they wanted to. They could put a guard on it and issue it in the morning under daylight, or they could issue it in the dark or turn on lights of Humvees or whatever to do it. They decided to guard it. He volunteered to be the guard. He knew that was his opportunity, especially if he's guarding ammo. At least the people in his unit realize, my headquarters is their subordinate unit. Realizing that if he's guarding ammo, all those people over there don't even have ammo. So that was his opportunity. He took advantage of it. And even when where he was guarding the ammunition was about 300 meters from my location, where the headquarters area was. So he had the mindset of take out the head and the body will follow, take out the headquarters, and really the attitude, the motivation, the demeanor of everyone else in the headquarters kind of falters. And it worked. It worked, of taking out personnel, and the latter worked in terms of their motivation and their attitude. I mean, they're distraught, as you can probably imagine, of of someone doing this on the inside. You can't even possibly fathom that. To the point where I'm looking at their faces thinking this group of people, my soldiers, cannot cross that border into Iraq and fight the war. At that time, we were scheduled to go 4 days later. That ended up being moved up 2 days later, which is probably, God saying, "Here's a blessing in the chaos. I'm going to bless you by getting you out of this place and getting over there to where you know who the enemy is."
Yeah.
You just got kind of, shot in the back by one that you didn't expect.
So to set up some context, I think for listeners who may not immediately know what happened in the post 9/11 environment, where we have the September 11th attacks on New York and in Washington D.C., the United States launches a long-term military campaign in Afghanistan, followed by in 2003 a longer military campaign in Iraq. And in 2003, you mentioned being there on the border, the country you were speaking of which is Kuwait. Is that correct?
That's where we were, yes.
Okay, and getting ready to invade Iraq there in the opening phase of the war. So some of the profile that you're mentioning with regard to the individual, there's not a profile, I should say, like kind of just it's a faceless person and not really knowable, kind of like just a place you've never been before. Like, how can you know what you don't know? And it's not like the kind of a good example of like the maybe the tautology of Donald Rumsfeld or whatever that particular time, which is super weird. But I wanted to ask you is it seems like the conversation that goes on, not just about domestic terrorism, but also with things like I would argue is probably a column there of domestic terrorism, like school shootings going on. They run kind of rampant, too many of them, too many innocent people. Here in Texas, we had a situation at Uvalde High School that was very, covered very, very heavily. It's been a very dramatic event, and a traumatic event, I should say, for the state of Texas. It seems like there's always, after the fact, people come forward and say that those specific individuals, they're like, "Oh yeah, we knew that that was the case, and that they were marginalized, they were being pushed in this direction," and it was only like apparent, seems like, after the fact. And I don't know if that's what you're saying, or if you're saying that it's impossible to know, literally impossible to know that information. So there must be some kind of a paradox going on where I don't know. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I unpacked all that because I had a lot of things to say. You were going through that, so I will start with the profiling. And and in that quote, what I'm referencing is profiling. And in that quote, what I'm referencing is that we don't know who it is. So you cannot say this person looks like this, they're from here, they do this, they wear that. Got to get rid of that, because we would have suspected that someone who wears the same uniform as us would commit an attack like this. Got to get rid of that type of profile. First and foremost, as relates to profile. That proximity illusion that I spoke of it's never going to happen here. We have this, and this, or we're in a small town in the middle of nowhere, whatever. We don't do that here. That only happens in the big city. It happens in other states. No. And then they said that in Texas at the first one, the other first one, the first one.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. You talked about the one in Uvalde. I remember the one in Santa Fe High School there, where a student said, and like I want to hug the student when I saw it on the video. She said, "Always thought it would happen here." Now, we don't want it to happen anywhere, but I prefer the mindset. That mindset says, let's be proactive and let's be preventative, as opposed to it's never going to happen here. There's no signs of it. what I learned in this attack, in addition to things that I shared, is we don't go home with people at night. We didn't go home with this attacker at night, so we didn't know what he had written in his diary. We're not going home with these students. Some parents are parenting in a way that we would expect society to parent, and some parents aren't. Some parents aren't even capable of doing that. So it's never going to be the same. There's a student, he was 14-year-old exchange student. He was living with a guardian. He had told his buddy that don't come to school on X day because I'm going to shoot up the school. Well, his buddy went and reported that, thank God. But that student had put together, he ordered various parts off the internet and put together a weapon to commit that attack. Now it was foiled that time. But my point is, the guardian had no idea.
Right.
And then we have the flip side of where in Michigan, the parents are buying the 15-year-old a gun.
Mhm.
Well, if buy somebody a gun, people want to shoot at some point, whether it's practice or whatever. But again, the proximity illusion led them to believe that my son, I can't fathom my son taking this weapon that we bought for X reason that we don't know, that he's going to take it to school and do something with it. And they're not at school to know what the child's going through, like what group did they get kicked out of, who's shaming them, who's bullying them, whatever the case may be, to where they're going to be provoked to actually take that weapon to school and shoot people. And it just goes on and on and on. These situational awareness strategies, the one in Santa Fe, if I apply, and I think they apply to almost all of these school shootings where there's something there ahead of time. So that shooter, the students have to be educated of kind of what to look for, and more importantly, what to listen for. But that student wore a trench coat to school regularly. So when I say trench coat to school, what do you think of immediately? Should be. I'm hoping you say two. I hope you say one thing, which is obvious, but I hope you say the other thing. So a trench coat to school regularly when it's not raining. What would that mean to you?
that there's a dress policy that allows
Somebody to wear a trench coat to school
I like that.
every day.
I'm going to head you off, so I'll make sure you get there. Now, obviously, this is my background, so my mind goes there immediately. Columbine.
Yeah, I was
Oh,
going to
yeah.
go there too.
Yeah,
And then-
it's a copycat world. It's a copycat world. Now, it doesn't mean because he's wearing it regularly that's going to happen. But if a student is wearing a trench coat to school regularly, is it a dress fad? If they're the only one that's wearing it and it's not raining and they're wearing it regularly, I'll tell you what that does. What it does as an administrator, as a staff, as a faculty, and even as a student, that begs a question.
Sure.
You know what the temperature is in Santa Fe, Texas,
Yeah.
and they're wearing it regularly. So imagine, you imagine August, imagine several months where it's really, really hot and they're wearing that trench coat. That begs a question. Then you're going to get an answer. Then we take that answer and we figure out how we're going to apply the answer based on what they said. And we're going to keep asking them. So that's one thing that student did, who ended up killing 10 and wounding 10 others. He wore a shirt to school that said "Born to Kill." That begs the question. First of all, you stop him from wearing it. Should only be one time. You send him home immediately.
Yeah.
You send him home immediately. But it begs the question. And then we have to ask parents questions. Do you know they're wearing it? Did you buy it? Why? Certain things beg a question. Then we start getting some answers as to how they're thinking, why they're doing it, and all those different things. Aaron, you mentioned about how we hear all the time after the attack happens where someone says, well, I thought, I saw this all the time.
Yeah.
So when I was writing the book, I began to watch all these different things happening in the world, and more importantly, attacks, no matter where they were, and to see if they were insider threat related. In my opinion, a student who's the attacker is an insider threat. They're on the inside. In most cases, they're always on the inside. Either they're currently going to the school, or they just left the school, or they're very familiar with the school and knowing someone, and they frequent the school. So they're close enough on the immediate inside or close proximity to the inside, if you will. And the same thing when it happens in the workplace. It's an employee or an employee knows someone there well enough to know when to do the attack, who to avoid, et cetera, et cetera. Which means if they're that close, someone else knows them and knows enough about them. And sometimes it's not going to be that person going to commit the attack, but sometimes it is. Sometimes they already posted on social media, but it was ignored because we aren't trained and educated on some simple things. So let me, I'll share the titles of these situational awareness strategies because it helps kind of put what I'm talking about in context. So the first one is trust no one. So when I'm speaking and doing workshops and doing trainings, I go over all these strategies. The first one is trust no one. And let's go back to the story about the embedded enemy attack on March 23rd, 2003, of how my trust went out the window immediately. But when I say trust no one, it's going to make people think. Because they're thinking, what's he talking about? Of course, you got to trust somebody. I don't know that you have to trust somebody. I know that you might want to. There may be times that you may need to. But what that does, and that person is making them think about who they trust, and more importantly, how they trust. Some people say, I trust you until you give me a reason not to. I think, sit down. Let me educate you on that. Let's just talk about that a minute. But for Bart Womack, it's trust no one. But I say it to everyone so they can think about how they trust. It's 2025, and the world is just not what it used to be. The country is just not what it used to be. You can't openly just give people of yourself like you did in the past or like your parents did, etc. So you gotta massage that a little bit. Next one is observe, listen, and report. So like I talked about with the student with the raincoat on, okay, you're observing it. And you got to report. I don't know what's going on, Miss So-and-so, but Jimmy keeps wearing that coat. It's 90 degrees. Like something's wrong. Something's wrong with him. And it may be something wrong with him.
Yeah.
The student can ask Jimmy the same question, but then go report it. Does it look weird? And they should know about Columbine.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's just being proactive. It's a sign of something. Again, it's a copycat world. They need to know there's a copycat world.
Mm-hmm.
The students and the employees and your faculty and your staff at your academic institution, all of you are the first line of defense. You're going to see it, hear it, and everything long before law enforcement gets there.
Yep.
Yeah, your doors may lock to the classroom once you go in there, but you just locked in the person is going to commit it. So think about that. We can't get out. They can't get in. What are already in, potentially.
Mm-hmm.
So one question that I have is, if one of the situational awareness lessons is to trust, to not really be able to trust anyone, how do you create? Do you have any advice on how to create a work environment in a school environment where you have the healthy amount of unity, spirit, or fabric, a team orientation. I mean, as an instructor and trainer, I always picture. I have my mindset on drill instructors is it's not like it's band of brothers. I've never had any formal experience with y'all, but it's a great great movie. But the reason I'm asking is because you have a lot of experience in training individuals, breaking them down to where they're part of a team and thinking about the common good, not just themselves. And it seems like there is an element of that in the idea of trust no one, but it's not immediately apparent. Can you comment on it?
I would go back again and saying that is to make people think about how they trust and how they build trust individually, how they do it. Mm-hmm. Right? It doesn't mean that I'm not continually building those things. I can't tell you in my life. We have to get off of me because I'm not a good example, right? And maybe if something like these things happen to you, you start thinking about a little deeper as well. But it doesn't mean I'm not going to give someone kind of a little bit in an environment where it depends on the teamwork and it depends on the camaraderie and those types of things, but I'm not going to give you everything. So it doesn't mean that you stop building the camaraderie, you stop building the teamwork, you stop creating cohesion between people. That's not what that means. You still have to do that. So to answer your question, you do those particular things. But if I got everyone together, the people in that office there, and got all you together and said, we're going to all do this thing right here. Start building a team and putting it all together, whatever. Some of those people, to include you, are going to go over to so and so. Well, I'd rather, if I put you in pairs, and I start assessing pairs, I say pair up. You're going to beeline to the person that you feel you can do this with, or more importantly, trust, because
Sure.
you know I don't trust Leroy. I
Right.
already told you that. For whatever reason,
Yeah.
you you don't because you don't. They gave you something to say, not so much.
Right. So I tell my class,
Right then and there, you've already decided. You didn't say I don't trust no one, but you have to do something to where I'm going to give you some of my trust. So innately, we kind of do this already. The people will present to you how they present, and then you get to evaluate it. But it is far from I trust you until you give me a reason not to. Which is part of it as well as you build it.
so I
In my class all the time, we talk about emotions because I teach psychology, by the way, and I tell people all the time that I don't think necessarily that we need to be more emotional, but I do think we need to listen to our emotions more often. And I think that plays into this idea that when you feel unsafe or you feel like something is wrong, then you should probably do something about it. But I think the way society is now is if we feel like if we do have that feeling of uneasiness or that we might not like the way that something's happening because of the culture that is built at this point, a lot of times people don't say anything because they don't want to be mean or they don't want to reject somebody or have their, be canceled because they're racist or sexist or whatever the ist they're going to be at this time. But I think that it's a huge part of what you're talking about is, when you do, it's not necessarily, not giving your trust to everybody, but also, giving it, but being also very vigilant and aware of what's around you. And then also how it makes you feel, because your intuition, that feeling that you have, is a huge part of you basically assessing the environment and kind of already knowing and expecting and from experience what's going to happen.
Yeah, so the next one is observed listening point. I may share a little bit about that, but I'll tell you a story. I left the military. I went to work in Hollywood as an actor and military technical advisor. And at the same time, I was managing an apartment building right across the street from UCLA. And I took over in like January of that year. And, it gets dark about 5 p.m. Start getting dark, right? I came out of a door and I looked up and the light wasn't on. The light should have come on. So I go back in the building, I come out another door, and that light didn't work either. So I said, okay, let me start writing down these deficiencies. So I get a pen and a piece of paper, and then I come outside and I look at the whole building and try to figure out what lights are working and which lights aren't. While I'm doing that, I say, if someone is watching me right now, they should think this is suspicious behavior. It's casing. They didn't know I was the property, building property manager. So it's casing. Right. So I go back in and they do the same thing. And now I said, well, I might as well make one order when I'm ordering these lights, and I might as well check the interior lights and see what's inoperable. Right. So I'm starting making my list. I go floor to floor. I get up on the 5th floor, which is the last one down here. Freeze. Well, and I've been around long enough when someone says freeze that then I give me a lot, the freeze pop. It means they have a gun pointed at me and, this is at my back. So I hear the voice and it sounds younger than mine. I'm like, okay, we don't want to no itchy fingers or whatever, And they'll say, put your hands up, drop us in your hands. There goes pen, there goes the paper, hands behind your head, get on your knees, they handcuff me. And then they say you fit the description of someone that was called in. Well, I already said that I should be called in. Well,
Yeah.
that I look suspicious, right? And if someone sees me, they should report it. Well, that's what happened. I'm a great manifester. I didn't manifest that 5 police officers should show up with guns drawn. I didn't manifest that for someone armed with a pen and a piece of paper. However, in my mind, I'm applauding whoever saw me because they did what I talk about. I hadn't beaten the book yet.
Uh-huh.
I already knew that these things are going to be in the book, but my point is someone observed, they couldn't hear anything, and they reported it. Now, did the dispatcher take it to another level? I don't know who did that, but they did all the things that I'm asking people to do,
Sure.
right? Next one is know your neighbor. So that means the person that you live beside. That means your fellow professor, because professors are killing people on campuses now, i.e., Las Vegas. Know the people that you work with. Students should know their fellow students. A UNLV classroom, and I forget the name of the class, but the student comes in, he has on like all black fatigues. So you remember earlier I said some things beg a question. So I hadn't worn that before, but it was on
Yeah.
all black fatigues. And no one says a word. The professor doesn't say anything, no student says anything. That begs a question. I don't care if you make the question humorous. Hey, did you just join the military and you're going off to boot camp? Ha ha. Are you acting in a role for a theater or something? It begs a question. And this is like 2000 and is it 16 or something like that? 2016.
Yeah.
Well, part of the copycat and doing these attacks is that not only do I need to have the weapon to be the part, I need to look the part.
Mm-hmm.
It just says that I mean business. Now, nothing happened, but neither did the question.
Sure.
Yeah. Listen, don't just hear. College classroom, sophomores, and this is a military school. I worked at this military school. Criminal justice class, they get on the subject of guns. And a few students say, I have a gun, I have a gun, I have a gun. This one guy says, well, I have an AK-47 and it's in the trunk of my car. Kind of ha-ha, and it kind of ends right there. And to include the professor in the room, knowing that no one should have a gun on campus at all, does nothing. But one student was listening, not just hearing, and to the point where he comes back and reports it to me and says, it sounded a matter of fact. It cannot sound a matter of fact if you're not listening.
Sure.
Everyone else in the room just heard it. Oh, he has a gun, he has an AK-47. Okay, no biggie. This kid, 19 years old, said it sounded a matter of fact. So he told me what I just told you. Said, I don't know what you're going to do with it. I'm just telling you. And that's what I advocate for. I don't want anyone to get in between the would-be attacker and someone else. I don't need them to prevent it in that manner. I need them to report it. I need them to listen. I need them to observe. Yeah. So the student comes back to the dorm. I walk him to his car. We get about 100 yards from his car. He says, I just want you to know before we get to my car, I have an AK-47 in the trunk of my car. Now, no ill will was planned. Still not allowed to have guns on campus. That weapon was supposed to go to his friend's father's house who lives in a rural area. It was going to be kept out there by the dad for them to come out on the weekends and shoot. They lock it back up. They leave. But he missed linked up with his he missed linking up with his buddy the day before. That was the one day that he says nothing when they're talking about guns.
Yeah.
That's what should have happened.
Mm-hmm.
If everyone's talking about guns, ooh-wee, I wish I could turn my mind now, but I can't because I have it in the trunk of my car and it's on campus and that's not allowed. Now, this kid, he looked like, Matthew Broderick on Ferris Bueller's.
Yeah.
So it makes me laugh because, you wouldn't even expect him to have that weapon in the first place. But hey, professional level of education or ideology is above reproach, right? Again, no ill will was planned here. But the point is, listen, don't just hear. And I'm not sure if you two have significant others or married or whatever, but you're probably telling your husband to take out the trash. He doesn't do it the first time. Well, he heard you. He heard you. But the point that he actually does it, then he was listening. Or if you have children, you know how this works.
Yeah.
And you say, "Did you hear what I said?" And they say, "I heard you," but I'm just not listening to do it. Listening makes ends up with an action. Hearing is just.
So
have you ever heard of the bystander apathy effect?
No.
Okay, well, this is something that happens in psychology, and they've actually done a lot of research on it. And what they realized is the more people who are there when somebody needs help or something is happening, the less likely they will get help or somebody will jump into action because we have diffusion of responsibility. And so, and what we talk about in our class, and it's like anytime you're in trouble, you better hope there's only like 2 people there, because now they're more likely to help you. But if there's 100 people there, then everybody else kind of like looks away like, ooh, I don't want to get involved, or ooh, I don't want to step up. I don't want to talk about this person because what if it ends up not being anything and then I look like an idiot, instead of, oh, there's only 2 of us. And we're the only people who are here, so we have to act. And so they've done a lot of research on this, and we see it all the time where people don't want to get involved because there's so many other people. Why can't they? And I'm sure that this is probably one of the things is you're like, yeah, if you feel something, if you see something, don't stand by because nobody else is going to do it. You should. We have to have people step up and do those things.
And in most of the things, it's pretty much anonymous. They don't know that you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
They have no idea that you're doing it. So like I said, I don't advocate for someone to intervene between the would-be attacker and who they're attacking. So this is pretty much anonymous. And then the last one, Aaron, to your point is gut check. It's our strongest sense.
Yeah.
But when we're feeling it, when it's talking to us, and we're sensing all these things, many of the things that I've talked about already as the strategies, we're feeling that thing right here that's telling us something about that person and what they're doing and what they're presenting to us. We have to leverage what they're giving to us. We have to leverage what they're giving to us. I didn't have an opportunity, but the people in my unit didn't have an opportunity to do that, over 22 years ago. We have to leverage what they're giving to us, and our gut is really telling us, what that is. But we have to do it ahead of time. We have to be proactive with that. Not after the fact when people laying around and buzz all over the place, and here comes the camera and the microphone and say, I always knew. And here's a case point about the Florida State shooting a couple weeks ago. That student, Phoenix Eichner. First of all, his mother is a deputy sheriff in the same town. That's whose weapon that he used. It was a weapon that was no longer serviceable in terms of it being in the inventory in the police department. So they had that older weapon, then they got new ones. So they allowed police officers to purchase it. And that was the weapon that was used in this attack. They had trained him on how to shoot. But again, that whole proximity illusion never could fathom that my son, who is the son of a police officer, would do something like this. But he belonged to this political group of students off campus. And the only rule they had was that you couldn't be a Nazi. So very loose rules. They later found out that he was, extreme to the right. Politics has nothing to do with this until you start killing people for it. Extreme to the right and extreme white supremacist. And then they kicked him out of the group because he was that extreme. But that's a sign of something. So you have this student on this campus where everyone didn't have those same values or those ideologies, to the point where he's become so extreme about it, he can't even be in your group. Well, should he still be on campus around other people who would not want him in a group either?
Yeah, do you expect?
I need students to make that decision. And like I said, kicked him out of the group. So you did an action, but you did not report it to try to even alert faculty, staff, and students that this person feels this way. And I don't know if the students need to know, but I do think that the faculty and staff needed to know that this exists.
Mr. Womack, have you ever seen the movie Minority Report?
I have. I would have trouble remembering everything.
It was an old Steven Spielberg movie, but I think it came out. I think it may have come out even before, the 9/11 attacks and everything. It was all about artificial intelligence and
Precognition.
the need, the precogs, the need to know as much as possible about the security demands, that everybody knows as much as possible, because there's a new focus and orientation in their society, I guess, aimed at criminal justice, specifically that they were trying to stop people before they had an opportunity to commit crime, because they were able to predict using data. And I guess
Precogs.
in this there were three ladies who were all precogs. They were
Right.
called precogs, like precognition type people. Before they even thought about the opportunity to be able to do it, they were already trying to be proactive. As you're mentioning, one of the issues that people have when they're thinking about or trying to conceptualize the point of the movie, or maybe the plot, is that Tom Cruise's character is like the head of that unit, in the police department. And so he is completely in denial as to whether or not he is capable of doing what they're telling him he's done. And so the whole movie he's running, and towards the end, spoiler alert, but it's 25 years old or so I think it's okay. If I have your permission, I can give it away a little. And towards the end, he finds out the motive for why he was going to do it. When he finds that out, he says, "I am going to do this," and he changes his mindset. And it's one of those movies. It's like, is it the chicken or the egg? And the reason it matters to us is we have not just like violent, shootings and things like that going on, but we have other types of insider threats, as we were talking about right before we got started here. Whether it's somebody like Edward Snowden with access to a tremendous amount of information, and then gives away the farm, or maybe like a Timothy McVeigh character, as we were talking about, like a domestic terror person who is capable of unleashing all kinds of things using their skills and expertise, and then maybe even something like a corporation, the need to protect corporate information, because today there's just so much invested in information, not because it wasn't 50 years ago, but because now it's typed and it's put on a computer, and it's not just up here where we can share it with our teams, word of mouth, but it's all contained and stored knowledge. And it seems like there's even a larger lesson also beyond just the physical violence section of this, which is very applicable to the current age. So I don't know. Is that something? Do you do training on those types of things?
It's really the training is I go in detail about these situational awareness strategies and how to leverage them. And when you got the people in the room, you get their feedback from it, or their takeaway and their questions from it to try to leverage into perhaps a situation, whether it's something that they're seeing now or something that they've seen before. But I would say that pretty much everything you just said, would apply or come up in facilitating that training in those workshops. It's because I would say the landscape of an insider threat is so big, you can still use these things to kind of either mitigate or reveal some things that may be happening. It's all in this big funnel, if you will, of situational awareness. We have to decide that we're going to be situationally aware.
Yeah.
We have to decide that we're going to.
Because the mission is so important, it's not up to any single individual to promote the common purpose or mission of, for example, our community college. We have I don't know how many different cultures we have here on campus. It's amazing. We have a tremendously diverse population. We have refugee resettlement to some extent here in our great city, and we have a lot of opportunity to learn a lot of things about a lot of different types of people that come from all different walks of life. And so I mean, that's baked into a college or a university campus or a high school campus or a junior high. It's like people don't necessarily make decisions as to where, those things are placed. They're placed because there's a need in the community somewhere. And that's what I like to think
Sure.
part of what we do is always trying to fill voids and stuff. So it's a complicated, it seems like kind of like it's just a complicated task.
Sure.
And I think it's a real challenge what you're asking people to do. And
Well, I'm going to disagree. I think it seems like something, really, if you look at the bottom line of what you're saying is if you feel something, you see something, you have to notice people and communicate. We over and over, we talk about, ask questions, look and decide. And I don't know why we don't do that still. We don't. I feel like, it used to be more about the idea of community where you ask questions. Your neighbor's parents could give you a spanking if you did something wrong. And that's but now that's not the way it is. We're very separate. We don't feel bad about talking to people or feeling a certain way about people, or we're going to get judged for, saying something beforehand instead of afterwards. And I don't know. I think it seems, it's not simple. Nothing's ever simple, but it's kind of that basic idea. We need to just be more aware and we need to communicate. We need to ask questions.
Yeah, from an education standpoint, the audience, in this case, is just say the students and faculty and staff, they need to know that they are the first line of defense for anything happening. So the training has to be continuous. It can't be, oh yeah, we checked the block, we did our drill of active shooter drill. The first and foremost, the bullets are flying. There's nothing proactive about that aside from the drill itself of what to do when the bullets are flying. I'm trying to prevent the bullets from flying in the first place because they're flying from the person who already goes to your school.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's walking down the street. They ain't coming up from Dallas to Amarillo to do this unless they were in that area beforehand. They would be on that campus. Let's get away from your school. Be proactive. We're going to get away from that one. But my point is, if they are trained and told that they are the first line of defense, I think the mindset of having the courage and being told that reporting makes you the hero. You saved 10 people. You saved what happened at Florida State from happening. You saved from what happened at Uvalde happening. You saved what happened at Virginia Tech the first time happening. Oh, you saved what happened at Virginia Tech the second time happening by knowing that you are the first line of defense. Mm-hmm. So now you begin to develop some courage to be able to, observe, listen, and report. And even if you have to go to the administrator or staff or faculty that you know best to tell them, that, okay, this thing that happened, go to the one that you know best. I'm talking to smaller levels, or I'd say high schools. I encourage that faculty and staff that you have to start befriending the students. All of you aren't good people. You pull out the curriculum and you say, do this or else, and you get the grade, and that's it. I know that. But some people are better with people, like Mr. So-and-so, because everyone talks to Mr. So-and-so because Mr. So-and-so is a people person. And they will go tell Mr. So-and-so and Mrs. So-and-so something they don't tell their parents. Well, that's who you go tell that this thing is happening. But it's incumbent upon the faculty and staff, befriend them, and then they'll tell you stuff. But if you don't, they're never going to tell you either. And they're not telling the parents at home that so-and-so bought a gun to school in his book bag. So the whole communication thing hasn't started happening. But first and foremost, they need to understand their role.
Yeah.
And yeah, law enforcement is here, and they will come when they are called. But they are reacting and the bullets are flying. Mm-hmm. What can we do as an academic institution or an organization to prevent that from even happening, since it was your student, your fellow student who did it in the first place? The law enforcement person ain't never going to know about that. They ain't going to know that they wore that trench coat to school. They're not going to know all those things that they're putting out there for you to pick up on and be able to do something about, long before it happens. Trench coat doesn't mean you're going to shoot up the school. But it begs the question. Now we can start digging deeper. We start asking the parents, why is he wearing that? Is something wrong? Well, yes, it's mental health issue. Okay, what's being done about that? Well, now we know, and now we can begin to watch. Okay,
Right.
then he shows up with the shirt that says "Born to Kill." Well, okay, parents, something's wrong, but now we know and we can watch. How can we help? Hell, the counselors need to know about that because they have a role in this now.
Hmm.
But if we never do anything about it, then we got 10 dead and 10 wounded.
See, and a lot of times I think those are signs for really they're doing it so that you can see, so you'll help, right? Because a
A
lot
lot
of
of people
people,
don't ask for help because
Stop me, please.
right.
Stop me, please. Okay, if you're not, I gave you everything.
Hmm.
Yeah. I may
That's
stop myself on the end after the attack, or I may not. I'll let this attack, and it's like suicide by attack. I'm gonna
uh-huh.
commit the attack, and the police are gonna kill me. That's the suicide. If
Right.
I don't kill myself, if I don't have the courage to do that, then police will kill me.
Sure.
That's what I wanted anyway.
Hmm.
Yeah. There's a so I'll make sure that we touch on in my opinion, one of the major reasons I think that you're telling your story, and on this platform for sure, but to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you guys are. I like your mug, by the way. That's a cool mug. Yeah. Anyway, what the reasons you're here, the reason we're talking to you today, the reason you wrote your book, and it potentially being made into a film or is being made into a film.
Yeah, I'm working on that. So it was a it was paramount for me to tell the story because I wanted the world to know that these attacks can come from the inside. Like don't start looking for it over here or this country or all that crap. It can come from the inside first and
Hmm.
foremost. So I need about the story and how it happened. And if it happened inside the close knit brotherhood of the armed forces, that it can happen in any campus, community, or organization at any time and anywhere. Domestic terrorism is our new reality. That was the reason for writing the book. Then putting in the situation and wearing the strategies. Um, Now I forgot your question.
It was just I want to make sure that we get to touch on the element of your teammates.
Okay, yeah. So that was written for writing the book, but it was difficult in a manner of I'd never written anything before, and it was hard. I had to go around and get the stories from everyone. Some of them could talk, and some of them couldn't, and had to wait that out. And I learned how people were different through that process. Um, but to get this on the biggest stages, if you will, that was the reason for doing the movie. We had this attack on the ground where we're thinking Iraqi insurgents have done this. So
Yeah.
we're a fool. We're running around looking. We have no signs of anything. Interpreters that came in that night before I said, "Bingo, has to be them. Go find them." Well, we find them and they're scared and they don't know what's going on either. After we interrogate them and they're not a part of it. So now we're back to the insurgents of which we have no sign of, locating or identifying or anything on the ground. But it has to be them. Who else could it be? The border is 6 kilometers that direction. It has to be them. In the midst of this, a fast moving object comes in the sky. It's shot out of the sky by a Patriot battery, just to learn the next day that it was a British fighter jet returning from a mission. And now we had friendly on friendly, and we have annihilated an ally force multiplier. So we got all this crazy stuff going on, and just to find out that it's not even the insurgents.
Did,
Um,
did your teammates? I'm not to cut you off. Did your teammates? Did they receive like a Purple Heart or anything for their
yeah,
for?
good point. I'll put a button on the movie part, so I want to just dramatize for people to see. Everybody's not going to read. Some people aren't readers or whatever. Everyone's not going to even see this particular podcast, but I still want them to know because this isn't going away, and now it's gotten into the realms of workplaces and academic institutions and beyond. Um, but in this, of the killed and wounded, they never received the Purple Heart Medal. So that's something I'm working on. Very upset with the Army and the Air Force. Of all the casualties, 2 were Air Force, 1 killed, 1 wounded. And neither department is budging on these Purple Hearts. So the military never called this anything. They didn't say it was a terrorist attack. I'm the only one saying that. So if you get that out there, keep saying terrorist attack, because that's language that people need to understand of what it was. And what I read to you that was in his diary, how can it be anything other than that? So the Department of Army and Department of Air Force has those same diary quotes. They just have not embraced this as a terrorist attack. They haven't called him any of our country. They haven't called it anything. At
Do you
this
think?
point, I don't care if they call it friendly fire, because Pat Tillman, God rest his soul, received the Purple Heart from friendly fire. He was shot by his own team members.
So, I mean, is it because they don't want to admit that they missed out on all of this, or what do you think the reasoning for that is?
Yeah, I don't know, but I like that one. I think that's part of it, because they haven't called it anything, right? I'm giving them some choices. If you look at the Purple Heart regulation, he clearly is the definition of an enemy of our country. Stop calling him a terrorist, right? So here's what happened. So this happened in 2003. In 2009, there was the same type of attack that happened in Fort Hood, Texas. Army major killed and wounded people in Fort Hood, Texas, for the same ideology as Akbar, religious beliefs. He was in communication with a foreign terrorist organization, which means his communication. Well, we established it. When I sent you an email and you responded, it's communication. If you never talked again, if I never made it to your show, if someone's going to look at my computer and yours, they communicated.
Sure.
Or said this, Aaron said that. And that's pretty much what happened with that major. A delegation of politicians, to include 6 of them in the state of Texas, went to the Secretary of the Army back in 2014, 15, said this is wrong. Those victims deserve the Purple Heart. So the regulation was amended to add language of, if the attacker was in communication with a foreign terrorist organization, and the attack was inspired and motivated by that communication, then the victims can receive the Purple Heart Medal. They knew full well that our attacker was not in communication with a foreign terrorist organization. That still doesn't elevate or lessen anyone's allegiance to their ideology and the reason for committing the attack. So Akbar was so far ahead of his time, to the point where no one in the government, in Homeland Security, or the National Counterterrorism didn't even have the language of a lone actor.
Sure.
They figured after 911 that people had to be in communication who don't like our country. They couldn't fathom that if someone said, even after Timmy McVeigh said that it is my goal to destroy America, that, and they were American, that can possibly be a terrorist. Well, I'm sure they said it about him until he did. Both. So it is because of that language, to answer your question, Aaron, about being in communication with a foreign terrorist organization, that's their response to my Purple Heart, or the Purple Heart packet that's been submitted on behalf of these victims. The response is just, in 2015, the regulation said blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's great, but this happened in 2003.
Yeah.
But they
So,
don't address that.
I mean, and
I don't know, what's
on
the
the
next
cusp
step?
of war as well. Like what?
Well, the next step is take this podcast, you get it to the President of the United States, because I'm sure he'll disagree with them, and make it happen.
okay, so
I've told some friends that I'm just short of making a sign that says Purple Hearts denied, and going, if I can ever get to where the press is at the White House, so I'm going to go to the White House, hold up my sign. I'm going to go to the Congress and hold up my sign. And I'm going to go to the National Press building there and hold up the sign.
It's
So
almost
it's going to take this type of work. It's going to take, publicity and media to talk about the wrong, because there's no one, even inside the military, mind you, none of them have said anything.
yeah.
Even to say that they don't deserve it. They're just not saying anything.
So yeah, it just seems like if surely not the people don't, everybody doesn't know, because if they did, then it wouldn't be denied. I mean, I don't know. I'm not in the military, but if
Yeah.
I saw your application, I would be like, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, if Akbar had not said the things in his diary and then carried out those things, then they would not deserve the Purple Heart. It would just be
Right.
some people killed and some people wounded.
Yeah.
That's all it would be. And I wouldn't be fighting for it because I mean I know the regulation, but you can't tell me that this is not in alignment with the enemy of our country. You know, arguably, if Osama bin Laden said it's my goal to destroy America, then unequivocally he's the enemy of our country. Let alone that he ran a terrorist organization.
Mm-hmm.
But why? Because he doesn't live here? Because he didn't live here? That's why? He used to be an ally of America. But as soon as he went the other way, now he's the enemy of our country. And then he forms this terrorist organization.
Yeah.
So what's the difference? There's no difference. You know, so I had to get my voice and what I just told you in front of as many people as I can, and everyone plays a role here.
Yeah.
I tried to get politicians to follow the same model of that delegation in Texas, to form a delegation, not do it by themselves. You know, this is not about credit. This is about doing what's right based on the evidence, right? So it's not about that, you know, this congressman gets a credit or that one or whatever. It's not about that. And I'm trying to get them to understand that. So it has been taken, you know, with that packet and congressmen writing letters individually, but they're getting the same response.
Sure.
Now, I didn't get a response. I sent the packet. I didn't get a response. The responses came to the congressman. You know, so I credit and applaud Congressman Bacon out of Nebraska. He's the one who wrote the first letter. He's the one who got the first letter from them saying the 2015 crap, which he did not agree with vehemently. And Congressman Green out of Tennessee, Congressman DeLuzio here in Pittsburgh, they all did it individually, and they all are veterans. I'm trying to get all the veterans that are congressmen to collectively go to the Secretary of the Army, go to the Secretary of Defense, go to the President, and get this done. And I don't think any of those three individuals, of which the Secretary of the Army is the approving authority, it doesn't need to go any higher than him to approve it.
So there needs to be organization within and pretty much every community that we can find to be able to honor everybody who was wounded or killed in this attack, including your congressman, can they go to your website and find a petition? That would be Bart Womack. I'll make sure that I get this on the screen. BartWomack.com, and well, we certainly appreciate you being a part of our conversation today. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your service. I want to echo absolutely what Beth said at the very beginning, which is that, you know, it's not very often you get to tell people face to face, and so thank you very much. We certainly appreciate you, and we want to make sure that we do everything we can to honor sacrifice.
Yes.
All right, Beth, Aaron, it's been a pleasure talking with you both, sharing this information. I hope the audience gets something out of it, and thank you for having me, and thank you for the gesture.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Thank you.
All right. God bless. Have a wonderful day.